Yes, so I am an associate professor at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, the graduate program of philosophy. I'm visiting faculty at the Dartmouth College. Oh, Peter is not yet there. I have to wait for my supervisor. And I am the coordinator of this work group. Right, so let's start. Where's Peter? Come on, Peter. You're not attending my talk. Where's the slides, passer? Okay, it's okay. A mess, as usual. Hello. It's here. Crazy. I'm too tired. Yeah, the worst thing of organizing a conference, I hope you're enjoying this conference, by the way, because it'll probably be the last one. I'll never, I mean, I'm sleep deprived for the 2 last weeks. I had like 3 hours of sleep for the 2 last weeks, and it's terrible. My cortisol levels are probably terrible, and I want to augment them. Okay, so let's go. I can't believe that the battery is just, it's not working. No, it's magnetic. We don't, we need to point to the computer. Okay. Well, when you go to the northeast of Brazil, you have those vehicles. They're made of glass fiber. They're specialized to work on sand dunes. And when you arrive there, you're about to start your ride. They ask you in Portuguese, com ou sem emoção? With or without emotion. So now, I'm going to give you descriptionary power about my own talk. And this is about decision making, one of the themes of the conference. And of course, you get a moral burden of what happens here. So, do you want this talk to be with or without emotion? Who wants to be with emotion? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Who wants to be without emotion? 2 people. Okay. So the community decided to have it with emotion, crazy lips, forward and backwards, cursing, But now the responsibility is yours. I transfer the burden to you. Okay, so let's make this talk with emotion. Okay. Something really important, ethically speaking, is that I'm not a fragile person. You can beat me up. You can crush me. You can come up with the worst questions. And I am like a Dostoevskian possessed person. And I am in this pulpit. I am at the stage as a bull missing scars. That's a famous quote from Nelson Rodrigues, great writer, citing the sonnets of Alberti. So feel free to ask, feel free to be rude, feel free to press me up. Okay, so what are my goals today? I'll lay down some metaphysical foundations to my empirical evidence. I'll explore different strategies for augmenting ecological relevance, and I'll explore neuroscientific, psychological, and XY empirical evidence which support my claims, mostly about decision-making, consciousness, and just a little bit about moral responsibility. Okay. So I am a weak emergentist. I will not lose much time here in the metaphysics, but I just want to give you from the position from which I depart. So, which are the distinctive features in my account? I'll say I work with nested hierarchies and invertedly nested hierarchies. So I believe in ascendant ontological inclusivity. What that means, everything that is chemical is still physical. Everything that is biological, still chemical in the ontological level. But in the epistemological level, we work with exclusivity. You cannot explain the fact that one of those days, a capybara tried to kill my female people because she had newborns, and her levels of oxytocin made her very defensive of her offspring. So, I mean, this is a vocabulary that needs not just many levels of description, um, levels there interact. We cannot explain that without the concept of gender. You cannot explain that without the concept of pregnancy. You cannot explain that without biomolecular chemistry. And so we have many levels of description to make this viable explanation. The females defend their newborns as something very, very important, and it is really a drive based on the neurochemistry. So what I mean with that to my epistemology is that you cannot explain that by as we discussed before, me and Renato, you cannot explain that with particles. You have to explain that with ecological biology and many other levels of description. Okay, and I just need three cheap metaphysical theses: novelty in the ontological sense, and my best examples are from mutations. Mutations are new things that sprout in this planet. Organization or systemic properties. Well, hydrogen is isolation, they are gases. Oxygen atoms in isolations, they are gases. This molecule of two covalent bridges and one oxygen is liquid. And this is the organization property. You don't need anything more than the structural molecular form of the compound to explain it. But it's still, the level of description is the molecular level, not the atomic level, right? And physical monism, everything is physical, right? So, and I think that I have something also, this is something that I kind of take borrowed from Ryan. The idea that we have to couple emergence with scope and not with levels, because otherwise you fall into circularity. If you say, what is novelty? It's the next level. How I define the next level? It's the one that has novelty. You have vicious circularity. So I couple emergence with scope. Scope is a property about the size of objects. And resolution, that stands for the R there, is about the amount of information you have about something. And here we're understanding that the concept of information from Shannon, the idea of entropy, is guiding this process. For example, if I say to you, I'm a radio pundit, and I say, oh, now in 5 minutes, so we're going to play a Beatles song. And then I say, yeah, it's a song from, which album do you like, Thiago? Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club Band. Okay, and then I say, it is a psychedelic song. Which one you thought? Strawberry Fields Forever. Okay, do you see how we augmented certainty? That's what I'm talking about. Instead of explaining this equation, I think the Beatles example is a very good one, as we came from uncertainty to certainty, right? So that's exactly what I think is what is occurring in levels description of science. When you say something is physical, you have a lot of it. It can be a lot of stuff. And if you say it's chemistry, you already have a smaller set. When you say it's biological, you have an even smaller set of objects, and you have more certainty about it. It's the same about the brain processing hierarchy, right? Okay. What happened? Okay. This is a provocation to Sapolsky. I don't understand what is consciousness. I always revisit the debate each 10 years, and they don't have clear concepts. I have a clear concept of consciousness, or at least of the causal power of consciousness. Do you guys believe that drugs must go under double-blind experiments? Yes, I probably, if you're well-educated enough, you believe that. So do you think that those pills, the placebo pills, make an effect because of the starch or because of mental causation? Please. If you believe it's because of the starch, just leave the theater. If you believe that it's because of mental causation, please stay. So this is obvious. I mean, all our science is founded in terms of understanding psychological causes. The physiologists believe in mental causation. So some sloppy dualist philosophers and epiphenomenalists will try to contend against that. So stop taking medicines, you know? Okay, and of course there's a physical mechanism for that. It's basically the middle frontal gyrus there, which makes like about 1/3 of the frontal lobe. And the people that have more effects of placebo, they have more activation in the middle frontal gyrus. So this is a physical mechanism to explain at least one case of mental causation. Okay, if you still not believe it, I published this paper with my brothers called Stupid Pun with Shakespeare, to buy or not to buy. It was the first review on purchase decision. We did a systematic review, and we reviewed all the articles about both implicit and subliminal affective priming in purchase decisions. So we have like 30, 40 cases that show the difference between having information processes with and eval consciousness. It makes a difference, right? This is an article that I published in the Mind, Brain, and Consciousness meeting held by the Psychiatry World Association, the World Psychiatry Association, and the Indian Council for Philosophical Research. I reviewed some of those papers. This is the paper I cited to contend with Sapolsky. It's a population made of 100% of white Americans attending pictures of Afro-Americans and white people. They have augmented amygdala processing when they see the black faces. Right. So what happens? You can see by the amygdala time courses that you have a peak here, you have a negative peak here for the white faces, a positive peak here for the black faces, and amygdala and frontal lobes are inversely correlated. When the stimulus is subliminal, it just takes 30 milliseconds, you don't have control of your racism, your prejudice. But when the frontal lobes had time to intervene, they suppress the prejudice. Okay? Again, another case when each consciousness made a difference for causation and for moral behavior, right? And they combined that with two social psychological scales. So they have 9,600 correlations, positive and negative, all them pointing with a lot of consilience to the same results. The frontal lobes are repressing the amygdala, and when we have the implicit association test, the implicit association test is perfectly correlated with the amygdala, and the motivation to respond without prejudice is correlated to the frontal lobes. I don't think 9,600 correlations are a coincidence. I think this is a causal power, it is genuinely causal, right? I don't think we can have 9,600 correlations by luck. Okay, I think I'm going to skip this one for time because of the time issue, but I want to cite this paper also because I think it's a very good case of ecological relevance. I mean, what I mean by ecological relevance is the capacity to emulate life in the lab. Experiments that really touch upon real life, and they're not just basic physiologically driven experiments, but they have something to say about our day by day, right? So this is a very interesting experiment. They tailored menus for each of the subjects. And what is really interesting in this experiment is that when you have too high incentive stimuli, is exactly when it's more difficult to control, is the most difficult to suppress one of the stimuli. So That shows exactly what William James thought about consciousness. Voluntary attention is the positive phenomenon of consciousness, and he says that moral repression and suppression is based on inhibitory mechanisms in the brain. So, and this is purely electrical. You see, it's purely physicalism. Or you amplify a signal, or you inhibit a signal, right? Perfect. And this is a physicalist explanation for consciousness, the two mechanisms of consciousness. William James was a genius because he said that in 1890. Wow. Okay, so yeah. Now I'm going to introduce some people that were here in the last conference heard about a bit of this research. This research is about the impact of chess learning in IQ in children from 8 to 10 years old. It's a collaboration with Clayton. There was the president of the Mato Grosso Chess Association. He was part of our national team in chess. He was my advisee. And what we did was try to, for the first time in the history of humanity, and not brag, it's just a fact, try to do an experiment that have all sorts of control. Because, I mean, the experiments in chess, they always meet something, as I'm going to show for you. So, what is the relationship of chess and decision-making? Chess is a sort of very rational decision-making, weighting among multiple possible courses of action, and try to see which one is more promising. You deal with choices among thousands of possibilities. Chess depends on long-term planning. The strategy during the decision-making process has to be consistent a long time, but has to be adaptive as well, because you cannot predict always what your opponent is doing. Intelligence makes a difference in making a better decision in chess. What about learning? Okay, our intervention was based on logical puzzle solving, so it's all about decision making. So the kids start solving puzzles easy like that, and after 3 months they are doing crazy stuff like that. Remember that they are 8 to 10, right? Okay, again, as rational. Why decision making in logical board games? I know that the proper name in English is board games, but I call them logical board games because the more logic you know, the better you go in them. So it's as rational as it gets, and you need some self-control. I will cite Kasparov, I think the best chess player we ever had on this planet. He lost for Petrosian. That was not that good. And Kasparov, in his book, in his memory, says that he started to show off. He said, I'll play attack. You know, this guy's an idiot. And he said, my defeat to Petrosian was exactly like the Brazilian national team to Italy in 1982. You know, they were playing catenaccio, you know, all defensive, and I was trying to show off, and you pay a price for being a temerary. You know, you have to defend as well. You have to be, let us say, responsible and balanced. And chess is all about that. And a very good quotation for the filmmaker Stanley Kubrick. He says, among the great many other things that chess teaches you is to control the initial excitement you feel when you see something that looks good. It trains you to think before grabbing and to think just as objectively when you are in trouble. I love this quotation. Oh, for those that like old school hip hop, the Mister of Chess Boxing from Wu-Tang Clan. Okay, those are, this slide is looking terrible. I know those are the old school experiments in chess from the 19th century to the mid of the 20th century. They are all poor, but they were for explorations. Then we did a systematic review of all the literature about chess, and we concluded that there's no perfect experiment. There's always something missing. Because to make a serious experiment on that, you need random allocation, pre-test, post-test, control group 1, control group 2, different teacher and tester, because otherwise you kind of, you know, they're in a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, trying to make the guys look as good as you like. and subject buy into the experiment. They are an intervention, but they cannot be aware that they are part of an experiment. Okay, so we follow this. Okay, this is in Portuguese, I translate to. Those are the 8 criteria you see there, the last slide, but we introduce even more controls. We control for the methodology applied, and we use this methodology based on puzzle solving. The authors are not involving in collecting data nor in the intervention. We use trustable and replicable IQ tests that can be replicated anywhere in this planet. And we have a very well patronized age in terms of very well patronized sample in terms of age and gender. Okay, so we use the very famous Wechsler 4 for children, and all this is the scales. What we use as placebo one, or the board games, to see how much chess is comparable to other board games. So, naval battle, reverse, backgammon, and checkers. I mean, the only result interesting here for decision making is cancelment or canceling. I mean, we have positive results in digits, codes, search for symbols. Obviously, the chess pieces are symbols, isn't it? And cubes. The good thing that when you do empirical evidence, when you work with empirical evidence, when you test something empirically, is that reality slaps you in the face. I was so certain that was the only prediction that reality contradicted us. I was certain that matricial reasoning will be there, because at the end, a chess table is just 8 by 8 matrix. But maybe kids from 8 to 10 don't have yet matricial reasoning. I want to test that with adults to see if we can, increase matricial reasoning too. But what is important about cancelment or canceling? What kind of capacity is this? It's to not pay attention to something, to increase your resources, to pay attention to something else. Exactly as I show in the Arana experiment about the decision-making on food, the more you can save resources to the action you're focusing on, the more effective you are. Because brain is a very complex machine, but it's a lazy one. And the more resources you have for your goals, the better you go to achieve those goals. And that's, again, are those mechanisms I'm trying to defend, where you augment the signal or you decrease the signal. When you do canceling of unimportant things, you augment the signal for those things that are relevant. Okay, this is a special edition for Frontiers in Decision Neuroscience. I did with Carlos, a friend of mine, colleague of mine. We have articles from Adina Roskis, Georg Notov, Gerd Gigerenzer, a bunch of interesting people, Chris Frith. I was the editor, but my take on those in this paper was, I was so interested that I assigned myself as a reviewer. I received that from Nakao, Ohira, and Northoff, that then turned into my sabbatical leave supervisor. Very Kantian way of defining things and categorizing things. This is a meta-analysis, like with all the decision-making experiments up to 2012, maybe. And he divided the decision-making types or categories into internally guided and externally guided. That's very Kantian. The external, the internal, the subjective, the objective. And I said, I don't buy it. They got crazy with me, of course, because you know how many calculations you need for a meta-analysis. So I say, I want you to separate a third category. Decision making, there's socially guided, morally guided. And what they discovered, because of my hint as an editor, a special network for social decision making that includes the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex, and again, the inferior frontal gyres. Now you understand why philosophy is so important to neuroscience. the way you categorize things make a difference. Okay? Just because this is very Aristotelian. We see the reality, and we try to make the most precise categories to interpret and compartment reality. So a philosophical decision change a result of a meta-analysis. Of course, you need at least a modicum of neuroscience and a modicum of philosophy to collaborate. And I always say to build a bridge, you have to have foundations in both sides of a river, otherwise it'll just fall. And so you see here the specific neural network. And then Georg said to me, look, if you can ameliorate a paper like that just with ideas, I prefer to have you as a collaborator than a reviewer. Come to my lab. And okay, so this is not a fake. This is the hack license of De Niro. He was doing his immersion to produce Taxi Driver. This is in the museum of the University of Texas at Austin, right? So there was a kind of, I think my relationship with neuroscience would be like that. You know, I criticize so much these guys. Probably if I go to a lab, I will see that it's more difficult than we think. I have to see how it is. But now I think I'll keep driving this cab. It's very thrilling. So what was my collaboration with Georg? We have this paper as a base. Part of the authors of the meta-analysis are here, especially Nakao and Nordhoff. And we want to compare like subjective and objective decision-making, first person and third person. I think this is super philosophical. So, I mean, they compare things that are, I think that are not absolutely clear-cut. So that's why I try to ameliorate in my own experiment. They try to compare professions and colors. How can you respond about that in objective and subjective ways? So, which color is brighter? Which color do you prefer? Which profession pays more normally in the market? Which you prefer? But I think, like, I don't know, professions are not exactly subjective. There's an imprint of society. So, well, okay, I'll skip this about the specific professions and the subcategories. What is important? The N2 potential. N2 potential. The N2 potential. The N2 potential is a negative potential, really related to the anterior cingulate. It's about conflict monitoring. It's about how hesitant you are to take a decision. This moment, go, no go, or one or two. So this is very solid in the literature. This is being explored for many people for years and years and years. So we can't, when you compare the internally and externally decision making, you can have a comparison of how much of a doubt you have in things that have internal responses and external responses. Okay, so what we did, we wanted to have IDIs that were larger to explore lower frequencies. We want to have them jittered to avoid learning during the process. Those are more physiological control measures to ameliorate the experiment. And we also wanted to introduce something, the same thing that we found recategorizing the meta-analysis. And I call that the gift experiment, because it's about giving gifts. And giving gifts is a second-person relationship. You have to project yourself in the self of the person you want to give a gift to. And somehow you have to try, it's an empathy-based process. And I was really reading Hume at this moment. I was reading Hume to kind of see, again, what was really the take on Hume of empathy. So, yeah, I think that's displayed it well enough. So, but I was a Brazilian candidate, so I have to understand how Canadians from 19 to 30 years old give gifts. So we did a spontaneous citation research, a poll, and we got the items that are more cited. Then we validate those stimuli of a different population, and then we went for the actual experiments. Everyone was not. We have to avoid people that have alcohol or drug abuse, people that have concussions, etc. And those are this was the part, the behavioral tests to classify and categorize the stimuli in terms of arousal, attractiveness, contrast, estimated price, graspability, familiarity, luminance, self-relatedness, interestability. And okay, so which are the typical items that Canadians give as gifts? Books, bottles of wine, and chocolate boxes. So let's go for that. So we have wines with different prices, chocolate with different. So we have 3 categories and 4 stacks of price. Okay. So those were the questions. So which of those gifts for yourself? This is the first person question. Which product is more expensive? This is the third person question. And the tricky innovation. Which of those gifts for your friend? So we make them imagine a friend and make it coherent in all trials. And the cueing that we give us, don't think about a spouse, don't think about a boyfriend or girlfriend, don't think about a person that you know for 30, 40 years or 20 years or 10 years. Think about a very good acquaintance that you want to get more related to, because this also will increase the empathy and the level of doubt. That will increase the anterior cingulate activation. I already explained that. First block. So really coming with my passions in philosophy, I want to try to test them. So the first block is just about hedonic decision-making, based on pleasure. What you prefer? Purdy's chocolate box or Miriam Chalmers, the sum of my amazing luck. Actually, the stimuli were really trying to capture the Canadian market, the Canadian culture. So we have 2 books written by women, 2 books written by men, and 2 local brands of chocolate, 2 international brands of chocolate, 2 Canadian wines, 2 international wines. I want to make everything fully factorial. I like good math. And of course, we have to control for physiological. They have to be. The lab was transformed into a pharmacy and a canteen. We had to control, because as you have chocolate, if people are not fed ad libitum, they all go for chocolate. So we have to produce sandwiches, and we have like cheese and butter with whole grain bread, and we have like a tofu and peanut butter for the vegetarians. I'm a good person, When they have juices too, and this is same category decision making. What do you prefer? The papers of Samuel Marchbanks or Carol Shields and Les? But you have confront between different categories. Which you prefer, a Beringer, Cabernet Sauvignon, or Michael's Ondaatje, the cat's table? And we have much more conflict when you go to cross-categorical decision-making than same category decision-making. I'll not explore those results today because I explored 2 years ago. And the second block, this is just for accounting for ecological relevance, really trying to mimic the costs and values of real life in a lab. This is super difficult to isolate variables and at the same time be able to test something that's relative for day-by-day life. But as the rapper and poet Criollo says, the money comes to confuse love. O dinheiro vem para confundir o amor. So we introduce the prices at the second block. And that makes a difference. And I think price here works as external hindrance, external limitation. And you see who is who when money is involved. Okay. Makes a difference. Price makes a difference. You're going to see it. Okay, I love a Brunello de Montalcino, organic Brunello de Montalcino, one of the best wines on the planet. But I'll give my friend Michael Zondachi books. It's less than a half. Cheap people. Okay, so this was the structure of the experiment. And we have the three different questions, first, second person, and third person questions. And a block, just hedonic decision-making, and the second block, hedonic economic decision-making, right? Again, I already talked about that. What is the thing here? What makes this experiment super special? There was a cockfight of ethical committee, but people had $40 for participation in the experiment, and $20 they were given as not as compensation, but they paid. Actually, they were rewarded with real gifts. And that was said in the beginning, take seriously this experiment, because $20 of your monetary compensation will be withdrawn, and you're gonna get one of the items you decide for. And basically, we had Carol Shields' Unless as one of the gifts, and the luxury truffles from Lindt, because those are the cheapest items, and of course, you cannot sneak into a hospital with bottles of wine, you know. This is not allowed yet. I love to, but and I want something new that I didn't show you last time. That's cool. Women are much faster than men in all decisions, much faster than men, and especially they are much faster in the second person decision. We are cheap. We are always, okay, that's super expensive. I want to be cool with my friend. Women pay for it. They don't care. I wanna make my friend happy. So we see how many different variables we have in decision making. I think giving gifts, being gratitude, it's a moral value. Okay, so I think this is a good case in which gender and sex differences make a difference for decision-making process. Okay, we discussed it a lot in the last Tampoff, which are the reasons for women being faster than men and having less of a anterior cingulate processing, meaning that they are less doubtful, they have less conflict to decide. If you want to discuss that at the end or with questions, we can do it. A lot of people raised the first time I presented this data that probably this is a function of women normally in society. It's part of their, the tasks to be responsible for choosing gifts and blah, blah, blah. Okay, I think I skipped this very technical part, but we are exploring ERPs, the relationship with, especially among the ERPs, the N2, redness potentials, event-related spectral perturbations, intertrial coherence, ask Loretta to make like very beautiful topographic maps and see the relationship between anterior cingulate and the rest of the frontal lobes, especially the LPFC. But EEG is not that spatially precise. But if you have any suggestions, that would be cool. So, again, what is the importance for everything that I said about decision-making and consciousness? It's really a complex process. We need to have multi-vector causality. It's not linear, and it's about criteria. So that's why I'm working with Peter, because we both believe in criteria causation. When I did my PhD, I was not aware of Peter's work yet, and then like years after I was presenting, to talks and conferences, I said, everyone, that's kind of similar to Peter. I said, who's Peter? Oh, okay. And then I get to read it. I say, yeah, very similar indeed. It's nice that we were working together. He's my supervisor right now. Okay. This is, it's not running. This is a video. Can you try to, I don't know what happened. Okay. Oh, why? Yeah, play. Video not found? Hours downloaded. Okay, this is my collaboration with Dirceu. There's up there. We are doing some research with Muay Thai fighters. So what we do, we explore perceptual decision making. So we have the causal variables. We have the Stroop test in his 3 dimensions, color, word, color, and incongruous, and focus and diffuse attention. And we have a bunch of intervening bodily and chemical variables. We collected salivary cortisol, testosterone via ear lobule collection. Yeah, the correct one should make ERA instead of ear in English. Lactic acid, body mass index, lean body mass index, fat body mass index, absolute lean mass, absolute body mass, absolute fat body mass. And we generated somatotypes, ectomorph, mesomorph, endomorph, and basic metabolism and caloric expenditure. I mean, I received the table, the Excel table today. Was like, I have 3 months of work for the stats here. Okay, no, not yet. Okay, this video seems to be charging. So which are the interesting results here? So what was our prediction? Actually, we responded to Evan Thompson here, because he says that the relationship between consciousness, as an activist, it says the relationship between consciousness and bodily movement is very, very, very important. It is really a fundamental connection. And he says that very, very basic lower processes are bottom up, similar, they're fundamental to consciousness. So we want to try to test that. That's exactly what we did here. So how is the structure of the experiment? We collect Stroop tests and focus and diffuse attention before and after fighting. Those guys beat the crap of each other, and they do attention and perceptual decision-making tests. Let me see if the video, try now, Thiago, if it's, to see how, if it works. I mean, that's why I said to Bruno to test it in advance. What's functioning there are the sound. Okay, but I mean, believe it, these guys are beating the crap of each other. You can see it. Yeah, so they are tested before and after. And what we found, after 3 rounds of fighting, they do better in terms of attention and decision making. The cortisol levels are increased, and that makes them more like a kind of fight or flight state. They get really efficient. And we know from previous studies that whenever the cortisol is too high, they will start to have worse results. But we were not able to test that because the coaches said, no, we cannot have this real level of fight for 9 rounds. Otherwise, these guys would be full of contusions and they all broke up. So we wanted to replicate that with boxing because it's not that damaging, Anyways, ecological relevance, as I promised in my abstract, as ecological as it gets, that's a real fight. I mean, there are people cheering, there is a judge, there is referees counting points, and of course, the person is knocked out, really knocked out, we exclude them for the experiment. But because maybe they can be concussed. And they are better in perceptual decision making after fighting, after being pumped by the. So this is really, I promise to talk about different levels of causation. You see, a little bit more cortisol in your blood, and you shoo, 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 shoo. You separate what is written in blue, but saying green or red better than in your normal state. Of course, you want to see all those intervening variables to see how much different levels of information processing in your body will contribute to your very rational, perceptual decision making, this kind of cognitive tests as Stroop. Okay. Who sees those stars going horizontal? Who sees these stars going vertically? Vertically, the majority? Vertically? Right. Okay. So, okay, sorry. I mean, the difference between open office and office is destroying my presentation. Okay, so this is something that I'm working with Peter. So you see, you have the same task. This is a cat trial to see if people are being honest. This is masking, right? And what we want to know is, can a command from the experimenter change the results? And that's possible. We can have top-down processes modulating illusions. Somehow we can choose how to see it. And that's exactly what we want to try right now. How much we can decode frontal lobes processing to predict such shifts of perception that are intentional. Problem, this video will not work. Try. Yeah. Oh, yes, here you go. So, you see, the horizontal clusters in red, the vertical clusters in green, and we can predict in advance what people are seeing. This is super cool. This is amazing. But we want to go further. Now we want to decode this thing in the frontal lobes. The top-down influence and the way you perceive. Okay, of course, this is not as ecological relevant as the others. It's much more physiologically driven and basic. But when you're discovering something, you have to be careful. You have to go for one isolated variable, The other stuff, I mean, it's really cool because, for example, what is the ecological relevance in the case of the Muay Thai, the Thai boxing thing? The intervention is very ecological relevant, but you use very traditional tests. What is the ecological relevance of my EEG experiment? Almost everything. It looks really like Amazon compare products. It's real decision making. You see? You're trying to flip? I bet that you can. Okay, great. Okay, and how much time do I have more? Huh? So I had more 20 minutes. Oh, I was super fast. I could explore more stuff, but maybe we can have a big debate too. So I'm now working in 2 other projects, and those are the projects that we can talk about responsibility. I'm working with my students, the bald man here, Walter Sinnott Armstrong, Sam, in the biopsychosocial look, which is basically a project that works with vignettes. There are somehow mock jury and mock jury style. And we're trying to create cases. Like we have, for example, an aggravated assault, someone that had adverse childhood experiences, how much this is exculpating, how much this counts as an attenuation for uh, their behavior and the crime that they committed, in the case aggravated assault. And we're trying to see, based on previous evidence, if a description, the psychological level, and a description, the neurological level make a difference. And based on the previous evidence, we believe that the more hardwired, the more, let us say, reductionist is the explanation, the more is effective, right? And we have different scenarios at the moment. At the moment, we have like a fully factorial thing too, with two controls: a control for attenuation, a control for the description of a crime, and a version that just talk about adverse childhood experiences, the kind of more neutral vocabulary. A description based on the psychological vocabulary, and one there's based on the neuroscientific vocabulary. And we have a huge set of DVs, controls, and I'm very thrilled with this research. I think we're going to do well. This is I'm just showing a lot of working in progress here. Sorry, sometimes you're working new stuff. You don't have anything ready to show beyond the old stuff I show you in the beginning. And I like to call it the mongrel dog. This is also a kind of a homage to Nelson Rodriguez. It's part of XP8, our mongrel dog complex in Brazil. So we call the mongrel dog agency scale. Well, I convinced that Thomas, after years of pressing him up, we have to revise the free will inventory. We have to make it better. We really have to compare metaphysical sentences with more into the flesh sentences. We need to have real conflicts from day-by-day life. So just to give you an example how that goes, we say we have like a typical metaphysical sense. Free will is a property of the soul. And then you say, when my beloved one is in the room, I can't help but I stare at her, something like that. So we're trying to compare those sentences. They are just metaphysical statements with sentences we need to talking about real top-down control. Or, for example, I have more freedom of the will than an alcoholic because I can take 2 caipirinhas and stop, and they usually can't. I'm not reproducing our sentences exactly. So we're trying to compare those things, to use experimental philosophy to compare. Like, this is kind of inspired by, I would say, by Walter that just talked, because from general to particular, you all have paradoxes. And that's exactly what you want to explore. How much of Thomas don't like the idea that they are contradictory. I'll try to phrase it in a way that probably will satisfy him a little bit more. They're not perfectly coherent. That attenuates the tension, maybe. Right. So let's go for conclusions. Consciousness and rationality make a difference. If you don't believe that, I don't know where you were. You never played chess. You never made any economic decision making. I don't know. Sorry. If you want to address the question previously called free will, and that's something that I really have to say, I don't believe in free will. I think free will in the traditional sense of an action without antecedents is ridiculous. It's like with phlogiston or geocentrism. I believe in decision-making processes. As I have been showing, decision-making processes are based in weighting, selecting, suppressing, inhibiting undesired goal values, and maximizing, attending interesting goal values. And so we need ecological relevance. For example, I showed you the Iran experiment. This is brilliantly, is brilliantly organized in terms of a design for In the case, there was not a fMRI thing. It was older. So it was a tomography experiment. But it's so beautiful the way that they can account for individual differences. It's so beautiful how they test hedonic decision-making for food. But look, if you're not a millionaire, you always consider price too. That's why I use price to make it more real in my experiment. So I think I was able to show you different strategies for ecological relevance. You can have ecological relevance in the intervention as the chess and the Muay Thai example. You can have ecological relevance in the task as in my AG experiment. You can even give up about ecological relevance if you're mapping a very precise, fine-grained, new physiological thing to then be able to apply it to real world. Okay? Well, and I think attention, intelligence, and self-control make a difference in the decision-making process, summarizing what I said in these last 2 minutes. Maybe we can think in terms of levels of more freedom or independence of internal factors versus levels of less freedom or more dependence on external cues and constraints, more internally guided decisions versus more externally constrained decisions are probably a paradigmatic subset of the issue above. Thanks a lot. Let's come back to the beginning. Because I thought I would not have time to explore my metaphysics, but if anyone has a question about that, but feel free to ask whatever you want.
Okay, so any questions?
So, I mean, I was sleep deprived. I just want this conference to finish. Yeah.
Anybody?
I was probably not very convincing, not very seductive, but okay.
Thank you, Gabriel. I would like to start by thanking you for putting up this beautiful event. From the point of view of a student, you have brought us close to our intellectual idols. So it was really nice to be here around such great brains. And I would like to ask you about decision-making process. Because
slides missing. Okay, I just discovered there were slides missing. I don't know what happens. Okay, yes.
Okay.
Continue.
I was wondering if in this research you're doing on the decision-making process, you were considering specific decision-making processes like the legal decision-making process, like judges. We have talked a lot about the hungry judge effect. That's not something that, you know, I think it was deeply studied, but that process of making decisions like that are included in your research, and if so, what?
I mean, okay. Let's see what I can talk about that. First of all, my research of the seal will not show that in judges, but it will show that in fighters. How much of your, I mean, especially for perceptual decision making and attention, how much the levels of the very basic, I mean, as the hunger in judges, or the fact that, I mean, everyone remembers the one on hunger, but there's also a very striking result in the same experiment when it's Friday. Just before the Sabbath, they judge terribly. You know, I just want to go out with my wife and have dinner. I have to judge these stupid cases. They are so severe. You know, Friday afternoon they were super severe. It's a Israeli sample we have to remember. Okay, I'm not. I mean, it's very. Let me say something. It's really difficult to have access to judges. Noel, our friend, tried to do that in Brazil. People are super, kind of resistant. They think they will show how partial and biased they are. It's hard to get this population. I mean, it's hard to get the population of students. Imagine judges, They are super afraid, super afraid to participate in these tasks. And the people from martial arts, they're just, okay, they'll help us out. I want to understand how my body functions, how my mind functions. They are so open. So, if we're talking about multi-level causation, I think, measuring lactic acid in your blood or salivary cortisol and I don't know what, the levels of testosterone, you're really showing how bottom-up properties are influence something that's clearly top-down as troop tests, a very top-down cognitive test when you have to, you have conflict monitoring, of course, that was why these guys invented it. It's the same. Again, until you singulate, I have a thing with this area in the brain because I really like conflict. I am a person of doubts. I study decision making because I'm a terrible decider. I always suffer. Oh my gosh, fish fillet or moussaka. I suffer to decide what I eat. I suffer to decide what I wear. I mean, I really think in Aristotelian terms about that. I think we have to study where we're lacking. We have to improve ourselves, develop ourselves. So I studied decision making because I always suffered with doubts. I always suffered to understand what is the best course of action. And I really take my decision seriously because with a decision always comes a responsibility. And I'm a really responsible person. So yeah, I never try anything with judges. I love to do it. I think this community have a lot of people concerned with that. Maybe this is our next step together, try to get a population of judges. But in terms of multi-level causation, I think the experiment with the Muay Thai fighters is a very good example how physiological, basic, intervening causes can make a difference in the final outcome, right? So I never worked with judges, but yes, I really love to see how. I mean, of course, I'm defending here the relevance of consciousness. I defending the relevance of top-down processing, but I wouldn't deny, as a physicalist, as a biological naturalist, that those bottom-up stimuli are fundamental, And the lower, lower is a problem, but the further you go down in the phylogenetic tree, they are going to be more important. We are bizarre. Beetles, I don't know if beetles have top-down control. Probably some, but not as. And they don't have moral judgment like us, for sure. So, yeah, I think this what you're proposing is really interesting. I think we have a lot of practical difficulties. It's really, should the judges open the guard and be, willing to collaborate is a difficult one. It's more of a practical problem that I would love to do such a research. Maybe we can talk about that, to try to see if all together can find a population of judges to try to explore with new designs, because there are a lot of being done about that already. But I'd love to explore, for example, racial bias, gender bias in judges. That would be a lovely research, for example.
Okay, great. There's another question in the back. Let me just.
Thank you. I was wondering if, on the studying of decision making, if you guys already studied with people that has psychiatric disorders, personality disorders, and how does it impact on the results?
I never worked with psychiatric populations. In Canada, was based on a research center. There was within a complex of the Royal Mental Health Institution. So the Royal Hospital has population. My advisor at that time was a psychiatrist. They did a lot of stuff. I myself, I never worked with any psychiatric populations. I already think it's really difficult to work with human beings, and those special cases. I mean, I think the psychiatric populations are super important as contrast cases too. You know, because you say, yeah, they lack this, and we have this, and you show how this capacity is capable of changing the game. So, for example, just to give you examples of from the top of my mind of psychiatric cases that makes a difference. For example, we had a research in the same lab, in the Nordhoff's lab, about phenomenology. And the depressed people, they report less vividness of perception. You know, kind of everything is gray, I don't care. And for example, people that are in hypomania, these things that the stuff's super, super colorful. You know, wow, beautiful. You know, and we're talking, you know, hypomanics are in a super interesting state, isn't it? You feel so confident, and you feel, I don't know. I never been in hypomania, but I believe it's like that by the reports. We listen a lot of reports. Actually, we get a very beautiful report of a journalist. They said, my best writing was always when I was under hypomania. You know? I feel creative, stimulated, super confident. So yeah, I think exploring psychiatric cases are super interesting for contrast. I mean, I cannot jump into directly without a partner to a psychiatric research because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a psychiatry, I'm a philosopher. So, I mean, I keep it legal, so I don't have allowance to do that. Okay, that's. But of course, it is a greater strategy to kind of contrast with neurotypical people, you know, to see the differences. And I think that's really important. Let's remember what Renato just presented us. If you show that a tumor in the frontal lobes can make impossible to someone control sexual drive, you contrast with a neurotypical person and say, yeah, those are supposed to control it. You know, I think it's important not just for kind of clarifying capacities, and that's being used in neurology and neuroscience since day one, but also since Phoenix Gage at least. But it's also important for understanding the mechanisms and the limitation of those mechanisms. So yeah, that's my best answer, tired as I am.
Okay, great. So now Sam.
Thanks. I'll argue about the metaphysics with you later.
Let's go.
On this point, one thing you could do to explore psychiatric conditions is there are scales that you can use to look at subclinical populations.
Yeah, please.
So you can look at the subclinical population, the scales that aren't used for diagnostic purposes, but they track symptoms of things like depression or ruminative thinking or whatever. So that could be one way to explore without needing to dive into, you know, getting a psychiatrist or getting. But another possibility is, you know, the kinds of decision making that you're looking at are sort of making responses within a task. And I think one interesting way to expand what you're looking at is the decisions that people make about how to engage with what they're doing, right? So one of the important transitions that people make is between more exploratory thinking and more exploitative thinking, right? Focused attention versus mind wandering.
Yes.
And it does seem like that stuff responds to incentives, and people make predictions about task difficulty that they use to guide this stuff. So, you know, some interesting things could be looking at something like attentional pacing. So you vary like how long you tell people they're going to be doing the Stroop task, and you see how that affects these maybe sort of second order meta decisions that people make, which could I think also be a different kind of ecological validity. But I think it gets at an aspect of consciousness that plays a role in decision making over time, as opposed to these kind of like short burst, you know, Stroop task kind of decisions.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But look, that's what we're saying. That there are different ways to explore ecological relevance. Actually, I didn't explain my concept of ecological relevance. Normally in the psychology textbooks, we're going to find the idea of ecological validity. I coined this idea of ecological relevance because, as a philosopher, validity is a 1 or 0 predicate, or it's valid or it's invalid. And I think relevance is something that can be a slider. It can be more or less relevant. So that's why I'm talking about, when I'm talking about ecological relevance, you can have more or less ecological relevance. But when I think it's very misleading to talk about validity, because validity for me is a binary predicate, just to start with. The second thing, I really like your idea of augmenting ecological relevance, treating a meta level. I think that's really interesting. But in the case of the experiment with the fighters, is that we already have a lot of intervening variables. For example, when I couldn't show the movie because this conflict between open office and office, but we'll say, for example, the guys were listening to Thai music during the fight. Like a sitar kind of, South Asian music. I was about to ask you just so, maybe just listening to Southern Asian music is already modulating your brain waves. I don't know, it's already maybe the kind of, super, how would I say that? The sort of microtonal structure of music is already modulating your waves. There's a lot of experiments showing the type of music that you listen modulate your waves. So, when you have an intervention that's that complex, it is as real as it gets. People punching each other in the face, people cheering, a real situation. We have to be a little bit more conservative with what you're testing. Because, you have to control variables. You cannot, throw, let's go for 100% ecological relevance. And you're not testing anything. You have to isolate variables. So that couldn't be more complex than that, And that's why we're collecting so many different physiological intervening variables to try to see the many multidimensional correlations between the physiology and the cognitive results, to have like a big array of correlations, that will make more conciliant. Yeah. So I think what you're saying is really interesting. If you have a less complex intervention, with the level of complexity in the intervention, you have to be a little bit more conservative. Exactly in the chess thing. The intervention is super cool. Those kids are learning chess by puzzle solving. And, it's a 3 months intervention. So we went for a very conservative tool, Wexler, for traditional IQ testing. But I think my experience in EEG is one that shows that we can kind of maximize ecological validity, even in the lab. Because look, those are real products for the Canadian market. The interface is not much different from Amazon compare products, So I think and we said to them, one of your trials be raffled by the computer will count as real. And you see those people leaving the lab with a book in their hands or a chocolate box. I could mimic the final outcome of a decision, of hedonic economic decision making, with the effect. With the real, let us say, costs and implications of a decision in a lab. I think this is a very rare level of ecological relevance. I combine various strategies from different authors, like Rangel from the Caltech. That's the beautiful thing when you do empirical work. You can be kind of selective. You see, this is strategy from this author is good for me, this one, and we recombine them. I think you produce novelty recombining things. And I think you have to be humble enough to learn with guys they're more, experienced than you. So these guys are doing this for 10 years, so I know that this strategy is solid enough, and this strategy is solid enough, let's try to recombine them. So I completely agree we view that that's possible. And I asked my lawyers, we love a meta level. We can always go for the meta level. But I think in this case, it would be risky, you know?
Okay, any more questions?
So, yeah, you don't have to give me a big round of applause because this was a terrible presentation. I'm too tired.